Skateboarding is so much a rhythm too.
Yeah, sure.
You have to have that rhythm that goes with your heartbeat, but not have it be too fast or too slow. Mm-hmm. So I just find that on a good day, it can be just as fun and just as enjoyable as it ever was. But deep down inside, there's nothing that really tops a good day of surfing still, though.
That was Tony Alva, and I'm Jamie Brisick, and you're listening to Soundings, brought to you by the Surfer's Journal. The Surfer's Journal is a reader-supported publication. Visit surfersjournal.com to subscribe. Tony is a vertical skating pioneer, original Z-Boy Dogtowner. He's credited as one of the first skateboarders to do an aerial. 1975 World Skate Champion.
Yes.
1977, at age 19, he launched his own skate company, Alva Skates. It was the first skate company run and owned by a professional skateboarder. In the 80s, he played bass in the band Scoundrels and has played in many bands since.
Yes, and his eyes have fangs now.
But you know, we can go into the sort of there's the details of the CV, but most of all, I think you represent skateboarding probably more than any living human.
Oh, I'm one of the only ones left, as they say, like a living legend. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've lost a lot of boys, but at the same time, to start off on a positive note, I mean, for me, it's just one day at a time, and surfing has played such a huge role in that because of the cross-training, and it's really my first love. The reason why I started skateboarding is because I really was attracted to surfing right off the bat, and the streets of Santa Monica, where I grew up, were very conducive to basically just riding a piece of wood with wheels on it. At the time, that's all we had.
Yeah. And
I became pretty good at that in a short amount of time, and it gave me entree into a whole different world that came from the South Side surf scene, which was connected to Jeff Ho's shop, Zephyr shop.
Yeah, no, and I've always known that about you, and it's interesting because, I mean, you're... When we were close enough in age, when we were young, skateboarding and surfing were very connected. But nowadays, for someone young coming into it, it's sort of they're sort of very separate in the way.
They're two separate activities, but they still do have that fine line. That 2 degrees of separation still exists between surfing and skating, especially with guys like myself that are still actually out participating.
Yeah, yeah. But I've known about you all the time, and as you've achieved so much as a skateboarder, but I've always known this sort of underpinning of all of it has been surfing for you. And I was curious just to kind of get a sense of, like, when did that start and how has that gone over the years?
When I was 10 years old, I just started like lugging my board down. I could barely even get it under my arm. I had a Marty Sugarman, a Wilkin Meth, a 610 with a flexi purple plastic fin on it. I'm pretty sure Glenn Henning was one of the first guys I ran into, pushed me into the whitewater out at State Beach, right where Mickey Dora used to surf, and all the guys. Jay Riddle was from surfing the jetty up north of there. I obviously wasn't really that slice of the pie when it came to being affiliated with Natural Progression, even though some of the Wilkin boards and Natural Progression boards were some of the first boards I had. I never really kind of fit in with the north side scene, even though my dad really wanted me to because he felt it was safer on the north side. Uh-huh. When my parents split up, I went to live with my dad, and I was quite a latchkey kid. Uh-huh. So I kept drifting to the south side, and I ran into Ted, and Ted was surfing in Santa Monica Pier, where he waxed like skis the bottom of his board to go out and surf the pier one day.
Ted
Deerhurst.
Okay, gotcha.
And so when he got to the beach, I told him, "Hey, bro, you want a little advice? How about a tip? Let me give you like a little tip." And he looks at me, and goes, "Sure, mate." And I was like, "Try waxing the other side next time." And he had a big Wilkin Wonder board, like a big fat rounded both side egg. Uh-huh. It's funny that I remember all our boards, our first boards that we got.
Yeah.
I mean, they were beautiful boards, and even back then, I mean, a used board was not cheap for kids like us. I think it was $70 or $80, $100 for a board. Uh-huh. So it was one of the things that was funny was my dad bought me a surfboard at 10 years old, and then at 19, when I became like a pro skateboarder, well, I turned pro at 16, but by 19, I was very well established. He told me there's no future in that. Huh. So that kind of lit the fire, the eternal Olympic flame of, I'll show you, you know? Yeah. And I wanted to be a professional skateboarder, and surfing and skating has always gone hand in hand. Yeah. But surfing is my first and foremost love, not only because of the ability that I had to attain through just a practice ethos.
Yep.
But just the experience of it, the humility it involved, as well as the ego bashing with other surfers. I mean, some days I got served up,
Yep.
and other days I had great days. And those beautiful days are the ones that I still look for, every day. When I surf today, I'm a weekday surfer. I'm off the beaten path kind of guy.
Yeah.
I ride definitely different experimental and extroverted designs in my boards. I look towards guys like, George Greeno and Bob Simmons and Steve Liss, and the list goes on, and I have boards that look like boards that Larry Bertelsmann rode. I mean, I've got a little bit of everything, but I don't really do the mainstream kind of scene when it comes to surfing. I'm pretty much, catch me if you can kind of guy.
Yep. Are there contemporary surfers that you are inspired by and look at?
Definitely. There's guys like Torrin Martin, most of the soul surfers, Dave Rostovich, I really like, Asher Pacey.
Yeah.
I like guys like that, kind of those like really, Ryan Birch is
More fluid
unbelievably
lines.
talented, and it's just amazing to see these guys go out, Tyler Warren, and actually build their own boards. They'll see the list goes on. I'll keep naming names.
Yeah.
But, just the talent with the professional surfers in the circuit is pretty amazing. It's very much like skateboarding now.
Yeah.
There's a definite connection towards technical moves and aerials.
Right.
But I'm not that impressed by that when it comes to the true essence of surfing. I'm more impressed by the roots that come from guys like Wayne Lynch, Ted Spencer, and Nat Young, and Midget Farley, guys like that. Those were my first big influences, even before Californians and Hawaiians.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, I started skating before surfing, but I started skating in the mid-'70s. And I read Skateboarder magazine, and you guys, the Dogtowners, you in particular were, on my wall, etc. And the lines that we drew back then were so much more fluid, and it really was... it was so surf related.
Because it was about the feeling, not so much
Yeah.
the technical aspects.
Yes. Yeah. So...
And manipulating gravity to a certain extent.
Uh-huh.
See, that's where when I started seeing guys like the POP guys, when I saw Wayne and Jeff and like Sibley and Urbany and the list goes on, like all of those guys that were out there surfing, they started to really change the way I looked at skateboarding and surfing because of the verticalness involved in their surfing. And also the obstacles, the way that they avoided the different dangerous obstacles at POP was impressive to me. And I put that into my skateboarding for sure. And that's kind of what took us from the streets to the banks and the laterals to the vert, to the vertical. Once we got into vertical, that was total surf skating.
Yeah. Yes.
And all we wanted to do was just tap the lip or throw down like a kind of Bertelsmann style turn. And Bertelsmann and all those guys came into play because of the fact, not only the boards that they rode, but their style, the way they carried themselves, and also the colors that affiliated that era with what Jeff Ho was doing.
Yes.
Because Stesic and Jeff definitely had a look.
Yeah.
And with Skip as the sander, you got those hard edges, and everything changed. And when I started riding for Zephyr, not only was I privy to a whole nother world as far as surfing and skateboarding went, but I also started to be influenced by guys that were more like a Hawaiian style or a South Side LA style, which was way more gangster and kind of like, car culture meets Chicano culture, but we surf.
Yes. Yep.
So,
and it was very much in that kind of low slung style, like
definitely low to the ground.
Yeah, a lot of hands touching the ground.
Low to the ground.
Interesting.
A lot of wear and tear on the hands, the jeans, the trousers. We went through clothes. We were major gear pilots.
No, I remember that from the early skateboarder magazines. In fact, I went so far as to seeing you guys with all the butts grinded through and the shoes with the holes poking out. And I would get the brand new stuff and I'd go grind it away just to try to get there quicker. But well,
the coolest thing was Vans started selling me one shoe at a time. That was a major breakthrough for me.
Interesting. Because the back one would just get hammered first.
Yeah, they would sell me one shoe at a time. That's why I had asymmetrical shoes, colors but the styles were usually the same. It was the same shoe, but it's just a different color.
I'm surprised you were paying for shoes back then.
Not much. I think it was maybe like $3 for a shoe. And Steve Van Doren, he actually kind of gave me, opened the door for me by talking to his dad about it. And there was a lady named Betty Mitchell that worked at the store on 19th and Wilshire. And they actually would sell me one shoe at a time because I requested it.
Wow.
And then it became a thing for Vans that they would actually sell anybody one shoe at a time if they ask for it.
Interesting. So you're in the south side of Santa Monica, you're surfing and you're skating.
Yes.
And then the two are sort of fused, but then skateboarding kind of blows up. And it's interesting because when I think about, when you talk about your father saying there's no future in that, there really wasn't. Like you were one of the pioneers of a sort of viable professional career, right?
I didn't know that at the time, but, I just didn't want to live the same lifestyle that my dad was, that every 9 to 5 grind and then just coming home and drinking yourself into a stupor and then waking up the next morning and doing it again. I just saw my dad just going through this meat grinder of just like, society in a blue collar world. And it looked horrible to me, even though I loved my dad and I totally admired and respected him. But I didn't want that life that he had. I wanted something different, new and different.
Yeah.
And my first mentor, besides my father and the guys from the Zephyr team, was a guy named Bunker Spreckels, and when I hooked up with Bunker opened a whole new door for me because he basically showed me a whole avenue that had nothing to do with limitations. Like we had no limitations when it came to anything that we did. Mm-hmm. And whether that be partying, surfing, traveling around the world, carrying ourselves with basically, like we were attached to something that was not only like revolutionary, but it was something new and different because at the time we felt like we could even out-party the rock stars,
Yeah.
And we took that whole surfing and skating thing and the fact that Bunker had unlimited financial, backing, and we just took it to another level. And obviously it didn't last long for Bunker, but it definitely taught me a lesson about life, and it showed me how to really assert myself in a way to where not only could I accomplish things that I dreamed of doing, but also the fact that anything was possible, kind of like what Bertelmann would say,
Yeah.
that there really was no cap on what you could do
Yeah.
if you had the attitude and the ability to just go out and try and just go for it.
Yep. And so if you were to think back of that time...
See, that sounded like an ad for a Hal Jepsen movie or something, huh?
Go for it.
Yeah, go for it. Anything is possible.
Totally.
Yeah.
Sunset Jack so much, Jeff Hackman.
Yeah.
But
I love Jeff Hackman, his style. And
Yeah.
It's funny when you see Jeff Hackman because when you see him on a wave, he looks huge.
Yeah.
He looks like a big guy, almost like BK.
Yeah.
But when you see him in person, he is a little dude, like
Yeah.
Reno. Like
Yeah,
Reno
for
was
sure.
a little dude. Michael Ho, little guy.
Yes.
Timmy Carvalho, like all those guys were small guys, but
Yeah.
they just ripped.
Yeah.
And when I saw those guys, I would just be like, wow. And even Rabbit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But man, their surfing made them look so big.
Sure.
But then there were the big guys.
Yeah.
Guys like Ian Cairns, guys like BK.
Yep.
There were some big dudes that could really surf too, though.
Yeah.
And guys that you did not want to take off in front of, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Big Ben, of course.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But thinking about that time with Bunker and that level of sort of confidence and kind of self-invention, right, on some level, like
Yes.
what do you think it was that was, because I know, so Bunker Spreckels, most of our listeners will probably know who he is, but Bunker.
The player.
Yeah. But he flamed out real early. And there was probably a lot of great lessons that you learned, and there was also like a giant cautionary tale there as well, which we'll get into. But I guess like when you think about that time where you have that level of confidence and the kind of waters are just parting for you as you're moving through life, right? What was it like? Was it just a simple like surge of confidence that was pushing you forward? Was it like visualizing things at night? Did you bring in martial arts? Like how did you get to that place?
By being spontaneous and just going with it. I think that I've always had this intuition for finding windows. And now that I'm 64 years old, the windows have really sharpened, especially when it comes to surfing and music as well. You look for these windows of opportunity and you just try to make wise decisions based on which direction you think would be the wisest direction to go, which I find in a way is even connected to spirituality because it's a higher power thing. Okay, well, the thing with Bunker was at that time we just lived in the moment. And we knew how to live in the moment to a certain extent. But the fact is that we really had there was no cap on like how much we were trying to do at that time. And I think that was definitely a problem when it came to substance abuse.
Yeah.
And that's what led to Bunker's demise. But for me, from seeing, especially that downward slide that comes from using like hardcore narcotics like coke and crystal and heroin and all that stuff, I strayed away from that, even though I always had an obsession, to pick up a drink when I was feeling like, uncomfortable in my own skin. And I dealt with that much later in life. But at that time, my drug of choice was alcohol, and I would mix it with weed. And a lot of times that took me down an avenue to where I would pretty much destroy myself. But I just had to learn. I think what I'm getting to is just like make some mistakes and learn from those mistakes.
Yeah.
And it took a while. It definitely took a long time to learn that. But meanwhile, just the ego, you know, the fact that we were attached to this, like, do you know who the fuck I am?
Sure.
Kind of attitude.
Yeah.
That carried us through some years, you know. It doesn't work so well for you at my age.
Uh-huh.
And as a matter of fact, it's better to get away from it and to learn how to walk much humbler, you know.
Yeah.
To have quiet feet.
Yeah.
But to actually carry that big stick to have the right tools for the job. And I talk metaphorically about surfing and
Sure.
skateboarding and everything. When you got big feet, you know, you can carry a big board with you and you can make it work.
Yeah.
But, you know, back then, I think anytime I was in fear, it turned into conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned a lot of things from guys like Bunker when it came to martial arts and how to survive and carrying yourself with a basic like type of confidence that people were afraid of.
Yeah.
I mean, people were definitely, even professional skateboarders were intimidated by the fact that a guy like Bunker had instilled this attitude in me, and I was not going to back down no matter what. And especially looking straight across at somebody before competing with them.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're going to compete against me, I'm sorry, but you're going down.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yep.
And having that sense of competition. Rabbit and those guys had it too.
Sure.
Definitely.
It's interesting though, because I think, you know, we're just looking at, for instance, the right next to you are these surfboards, right? And they're not the sort of they're not boards that typically come with like that competitive thing. And I know a lot of the style of skateboarding, there was like, I felt this about my surfing life and my skateboarding life earlier, is I've always been conflicted as to like, it's this totally soulful pursuit, spiritual pursuit, whatever. But then there's this competitive side of me, and they're almost like Jekyll and Hyde. You know, they're almost like two different things. But you got real competitive, right? Like you became a world champion
skateboarding and surfing. Yeah. Whenever I tried, I always got in trouble with the competition thing, and I still do to this day. That's what I run into trouble. But, you know, the thing is, it's like with skateboarding, if you want to be number one, you have to think and know that you're number one.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt about that. And I think with anything competitive, you have to have that attitude of like, I am going to crush you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just how it is, you know. There's not a lot of guys like Jerry Lopez, you know, that can paddle out all you know, shanty kind of attitude and drop in at pipe and nobody.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot different now, of course. Who knows how Lopez would be in this day and age, but in his time, there was that reverence that just came with his serenity.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I could have accomplished something that way, but you know, Lopez is a rare bird, and I think that his sense of spirituality, as well as just the fact that in the time that he was the guy at Pipeline, Pipeline was was a place where you could do that, where you could sit on the throne and get the best waves. I don't think it's like that anymore. Skateboarding's a lot different as well, but when I go out skateboarding and stuff, I really do get a lot of love and respect from the fellow skateboarders out there nowadays. I think skateboarding has evolved to a point where there's a hell of a lot more camaraderie and fellowship than surfing even.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's not as competitive in a sense of community. Where surfing can just be on the big swell days and it's crowded. It's dog eat dog, just about every spot too.
Yeah, and it's never been worse than it is right now. I mean,
man, especially with all the softboards and all that stuff. And
that is a really tough one. I think about that a lot. I mean, there's just there are not enough waves in the world.
I know if I see a guy at softboard dropping on me, I mean, that's it. He's a sitting duck, literally.
Right.
But I want to make the wave. I don't want to like end up like tumbling with somebody. I would rather bump them off or get rid of them and keep riding the wave. But for me, I ride a lot of less crowded waves, so I don't have a lot of confrontations with surfers lately. And I find when I do ride the crowded spots, I try to sit close to guys that I've known that have been out there for 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
And we usually ride together or give each other priority.
Yeah.
And that works to a certain extent.
Yep.
But yeah, there's pitfalls as well still.
Yeah. I know that strategy. Sometimes I'll paddle into a crowded lineup and I'll see someone who's like clearly the alpha and I'll sort of shout across the crowd to them and start talking to them.
I hear you,
and then everyone's like, oh, these are the locals, I guess. And you slide right in.
At Sakis, I get a couple guys sometimes, you know, they'll see me and it's kind of like a gunslinger thing, you know. It can get a little weird. But I'll assert myself where I sit and where I know that I can get when the sets come, or even the in-between waves are sometimes the best ones. And I wait for that one that I know is going to be a good one. And when I paddle, I just put my head down and I don't look sideways or I look straight into the where I'm going to do the bottom turn, where I'm going to take off.
Yeah, there's that famous quote.
And yes, I still do bottom turns.
Yeah, there's a famous quote from Rabbit, and it says something like, "I can't look left at Kira. I got a crook neck," meaning like he'll never look behind him. So he
Sarlo's the same way at Malibu.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
And I love Alan. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, but you know, like at the height of your skateboarding fame, you talk about like rock star, like you were even like the rock stars' heroes. Like your level of fame and sort of like a street cred, cool cred, whatever you want to call it, was so far beyond. What did that feel like?
Pretty powerful, but at the same time, I mean, like that was something that I learned from just being on the streets. I mean, we were straight up street kids, you know?
Yeah.
And to come from the west side of LA into like kind of the punk rock music scene, the kind of the crossover of fashion and rock and roll and music, surfing and skateboarding, all of that was like we created and revolutionized skateboarding to where it became like skateboarders have always been kind of like the trendsetters, you know, and we've always been hardcore rock and roll style partiers.
Yeah. And
so that was the thing, I think, you know, and the ladies like that. The girls were attracted to us as well, you know. When Thais and I were an item, I mean, you know, we were like basically like royalty in Malibu, you know, and that was more based on not only my ability as a skateboarder and my image and my attitude, but it was based on Thais' beauty, her natural beauty. You know, it just didn't get any better than that when it came to that era of beach girls, you know, from Malibu, like no makeup, no artificial nothing, you know, and just exemplified by just party girl that's just really, really stunningly beautiful.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff too was like have the hot lady, some money in your pocket, the bartender in your back pocket, the drug dealer in your front pocket. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's like all that stuff. And we're just so fortunate that we lived through that. I mean, I personally, it's a miracle when I look back in hindsight to what I've been through, especially when the punk rock scene came into play, playing in bands and just the violence involved as well as the drug abuse and the dealing with the cops and like just everything. It's just so miraculous that we lived through that. And continuing to surf the whole time. Yeah, yeah. You know, I've never quit surfing through all of that stuff.
Was surfing holding you together when you were like in the furthest into addiction / like ego, fame, etc.? Was
There's nothing like cold water in the morning, boy, to slap you right and back into who you really, I mean, who do you really think you are, man? It's like first thing, you could get a 3-foot shore break wave, 57-degree water in the morning, and blam, you're like right back to reality. Yeah. Because that's the thing about surfing too, is being in the moment. I mean, if you can't be in the moment at that time, you can't really surf. I mean, it just, you have to stay in the moment in order to be like truly connected to the spiritual essence of surfing. Yeah. And surfing saved my life in a lot of ways, because I remember when I hit bottom and I decided to just put the drugs and alcohol down and do the abstinence thing just one day at a time. Just the first day I was at Palisades Park, wanting more than anything to nurse my sore head, you know, and having a hangover. And I looked over Palisades Park, and the spot where I learned how to surf as a kid was like 3 to 5 foot, glassy, slight offshore wind, beautiful day. And I physically was incapable of going down there and paddling out and surfing. And it made me feel so just incomprehensibly demoralized that was the day. Wow. And since then, I'm going on very close to 15 years clean and sober.
That's great.
So everything happens for a reason.
Sure. No, and
but this was after 40 years of partying.
Yeah.
After 40 years of just partying till my friends were dying left and right of drug overdoses, violent acts due to alcoholism. The survivors were guys that were still really fucked up. Yeah. And I was just like, you know what? I don't see any future in this. It's like some moment of clarity for some reason hit me. And I think it was because all I really wanted to do was surf.
Yeah, sure.
And I physically and mentally and emotionally was incapable of performing that act on that given day.
Was it because you were so hungover, like still drunk from the night before, or was it just
totally, not to mention the total cheating and lying and like the whole lifestyle that comes with being an alcoholic at that point, because of the fact that I had become the person that I told myself I would never, ever be. And that was just that low bottom, binge drinking, just really just shitty fucking drinker.
You know? You were a fighter too, yeah?
Definitely. My dad was Mexican-American. He was a Golden Gloves boxer. Every time I was in fear, I felt like, you know, my anger manifested out in like violence, you know? And I'm lucky that I didn't get the shit beat out of me and killed in some of the circumstances I was in. I always kind of traveled with the crew too, which sounds pretty chicken shit, but I can just say, a lot of times those boys, they saved my life. So thanks guys for having my back.
Yeah.
But I think the bottom line was really, and I'll just mention it right off the bat, God had my back. I always had a higher power or a guardian angel that looked out for me, especially in dangerous situations. I don't know why, and I don't know how that ever happened. But to this day, I try not to take things to that point to where I have to rely on that. I try to rely more on instinct and intuition and make wiser decisions when it comes to being in danger lately,
Yep.
Actively calm, calmly active, that's my new mantra. That works for me a lot better than selfish, self-centered, egocentric behavior.
Yeah. No, that era we came up in, it was sort of synonymous like I remember the first time I got real stoned, I thought, oh, now I understand what's been going on this whole time. I was sort of this earnest, straight kid going to Kenter and skateboarding behind you guys. And you guys had this sort of cool, this like relaxed thing that I couldn't, I didn't know what it was. And then the first time I kind of got stoned, it was like I clicked into this zone.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like there's that thing that a lot of us do and have done, which is like you sort of equate that. I mean, it's like as a writer, I see this with the creativity, like a lot of writers think they can't get there without a drink or being high in some way.
LSD was a lot like that too for everything, for music and surfing and everything.
Yes, yeah. I mean, music is probably where it's most prevalent, actually.
Well, I think it's like the perception thing though, because like when the Doors named themselves the Doors, I mean, it's like that thing of like, it might work at first, but you know what? Eventually that door closes. And then it's really hard when you're chasing your tail looking for that first initial feeling that you got.
Yep.
And you can't find it.
Yeah. And
then from having an ally, especially with weed, because it's a gateway drug, big time.
Yeah.
When it's not working for you anymore, it just becomes a liability. And the procrastination kicks in, and then the fact that you don't feel motivated unless you've got some sort of connection to it. And when it stops working for you, you got to look for something new and different.
Yeah.
And the only thing for new and different for me to begin with was abstinence, and then it led to a high-grade spiritual experience that came from prayer and meditation.
When did you start?
I started studying Paramahansa Yogananda's techniques when it came to Kriya Yoga, and I also listened to other guys that had been there before me, guys such as Jerry Lopez. And I found that if I could just attain a level of serenity and have some equanimity in my life, that would lead me to where I was trying to find through drugs and alcohol. And I practice that on a daily basis, as a matter of fact, before you got here this morning. And I just find that I get so much more of a feeling of oneness just with like who I always wanted to be, even as a kid. I feel like I'm really that person that I've always wanted to be and that I looked for and through using drugs and alcohol to get there. Because I never found that place through drugs and alcohol. And I looked high and hard. I mean, a bottle of tequila and a bag of mushrooms, boy, you could be sitting right there between Jesus and Krishna, man, thinking you're like pretty up there on a high spiritual level. But the funny thing is, and not to even make a joke about it, you come down and you crash. And when you hit that bottom again, the demoralization that comes with that, I mean, it really does a job on your ego, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I just realized, this is something I cannot continue to do and live happily and be content with who I am and what I want to accomplish in my life.
Right. No, I remember, and I think this would have been right around the time that you got sober. I remember being at Bay Street early morning, like pre-dawn, actually.
2006 was the year.
Yeah, no, and I watched your film yesterday, the Love Letters to Skateboarding one, the Tony Alva story.
Has a strong message, especially when I'm in front of the mural on Wilshire Boulevard right there, the Dogtown one.
Yes, yep. So I got the year, and then I thought, I remember going to Bay Street one early morning. It wasn't even light out. I was, for whatever reason, in my head getting up way too early, and I saw you taking a walk alone, and I was like, I somehow sensed that you were actually
probably had a weird board too.
No, you weren't. You didn't even have a surfboard. And I was thinking,
oh, cool.
And I somehow sensed that you were like beginning recovery. And I'm not joking. And then a couple years after that, my late wife and I were in Albuquerque, New Mexico, doing a documentary on the All Nation Skate Jam.
I love that jam.
You were there, and we were talking, and you were fairly newly sober, and you
probably just a couple of years.
Yeah, and you. I remember you said. You talked about being humbled, and there's a thing in the Tony Alva story.
Which, boy, is that a flip side to the original,
no,
well, the 19-year-old kid, huh?
Absolutely, because I mean, I like was probably dropped in on more than once by you in pools at the dog bowls at Marina, and suddenly like Tony's going and I can't. I'm just got to stop.
Oh, I did that even to my best friends there.
but I think, you talked about being humbled, and then there's a great part in the doc where Glennie Friedman says there was a time in the 80s when Tony Alva was going to dental school. But there's a thing, that's a big theme, and we're of the age where we can relate to it, where like the ego that drives you to be great in surfing and skateboarding is the same ego that has to be like dismantled and kind of like obliterated crushed, maybe later on.
Smashed.
Yeah.
Crushed and smashed.
Yeah. But the ego crushing, was it a slow thing? Were there like specific moments?
You have to, it does take a little while. I mean, for me, it was in the first 30 days because I had people around me that had experience with that. And they also knew, looking at me, that I thought that I was terminally unique. And that if I didn't smash the ego and start over, that I was never really going to have any success as a sober alcoholic, you know? And so what it really comes down to is not only humbling yourself in your own eyes, in the eyes of another person who's had that experience, and just what I would call God, but also just knowing that it's going to take a total surrender in order to really reshape yourself. And so at that moment, I was instructed, you know, to just become honest with myself. A lot of it had to do with honesty. And so that becomes to transparency, which in order to not have things be humiliating, becoming humble really means that humility kicks in. And the humility comes from just being honest. So I learned to be honest with myself, with God, and with one other person, and I would call a guy named Robert V. I would call him my sponsor. And we just talked truth to each other. You know, we got rigorously honest with each other. And I went through, you know, a program with him, and within 18 months, he had taught me more than my dad had taught me in my entire life. But I had stayed sober through just kind of that first step thing of the abstinence is much easier than perfect moderation. And by being clean, my perception started shifting, which that's the spiritual awakening. The perception shifting. So what's happening with the clarity? Things are getting pretty clear, even scary clear. You know what I mean? And things about myself I had to let go of. I had to let go of a lot of things like smoking weed, you know, that I thought were assets, and they had become liabilities. Yeah. So it made my surfing so much better, though. My surfing got better and better and better, and it still is because of that. Skateboarding, cross-training, man, it's easy. I mean, skateboarding for me is like I can skate better than I can probably even walk down the street now with all the different little cricks and, you know, the little creaks and groans of having an older body. But you know what? It's like I can overcome all of that stuff because I have a technique. I have a technique that works for me, like in martial arts. And I refine that technique on a daily basis when it comes to skateboarding. Surfing is the cross-training, the meditation connected to even yoga in a sense, which yoga just means union, to be joined to something bigger than yourself. Surfing joins me immediately to that power greater than myself. Skateboarding is what I do for a living. It's what I go out and I do in order to be connected to something that I love, but also something that I've helped create and push to a level now where I would say, as far as youth culture, skateboarding is the biggest phenomenon, especially after the camaraderie and the fellowship that we showed during the Olympics. It's like skateboarding is number one, you know, and surfing is growing immensely. I'm not discounting competitive surfing, but I just think skateboarding is just at that level now where everybody and anything wants a piece of it and wants to be affiliated, connected to it. You can see it through the media, through the media blitz that goes on with skateboarding. Yeah. Everybody wants to be a part of that culture somehow. Yeah. Whether it be fashion, music, you know, like endorsing different, you know, youth-oriented products. I mean, obviously the reason that the Olympics wanted it involved was for street cred, number one. Two, for youth demographic. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure they got a bit of that. Yeah. But you know what? In the long run, they need us so much more than we need them. Skateboarding is just so far ahead of the pack when it comes to momentum and progression. And the fact that our biggest like area of skateboarding even is young women now. Like girls are skating good and improving and just doing their own thing. And I mean, I could go on and on about that stuff with the skateboarding thing. It's just, I'm proud to be a part of that progression. But at the same time, I'm happy right where I'm at too. Yeah. Do you get as much satisfaction skateboarding today as you at 64 as you did when you were younger? Yeah, on a good day, when I have a good day, and I have some days where I'm not feeling so on point, and I think that has a lot more to do with my mental attitude associated with the aging process than anything.
Yeah,
which kind of becomes a little bit of an ego thing. I have to let go of the ego again. But I feel that on a good day skateboarding, like the other day, just because I'm getting ready to do a trip overseas, and I'm skating a couple days a week, just so I'm not all beat up, but at the same time. So I'm still in the groove, because skateboarding is so much a rhythm too.
Yeah, sure. You
have to have that rhythm that goes with your heartbeat, but not have it be too fast or too slow. So I just find that on a good day, it can be just as fun and just as enjoyable as it ever was. But deep down inside, there's nothing that really tops a good day of surfing still, though. I think that's still my biggest passion in life. Is just to be out on a beautiful day, and even just get 6 or 7 decent waves, and 1 or 2 of them are just excellent.
Yeah. I'm with you. I feel the same.
And it reflects on my skateboarding immediately and directly connects to what I look for in skateboarding as well.
Sure.
Which is a long lost art.
Yeah.
Because of the way that I skate.
Yeah. Those lines are similar.
Yes.
What's interesting is, okay, so we've just had the final, the showdown at Dressel's, right? And it was pretty much Gabriel Medina won on the men's, and it was a big air game, right? And so,
well, especially on that wave because it's such a ramp.
Exactly,
and it's not a real crucial wave; it's a real playful kind of skate park wave.
Sure. And aerials have been such a part of surfing now, and it's sort of a given.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is if we trace it way back, when we were surfing, there were no aerials really in the 70s, and yet in skateboarding you did the first aerials, which would actually kind of feed over into surfing later on.
Yes.
But what was it? I've always been curious because as I said, I poured over Skateboarder magazine and watched all the movies and whatnot. And you guys at the Dog Bowl, etc.
That's where the first aerial was documented.
That's what I was going to say. So what was it like to do the first aerial? How did you get there?
Spontaneous. It wasn't really thought out at all. It just happened. It was just a blasting thing, kind of like how Bertelmann, those guys were surfing. We were just hitting the lip really hard and blasting out. And I created a technique that allowed me to, when I let go of the board, actually direct the board back into the transition and ride it out. And it just happened spontaneously. And Glenn was there and captured it on camera. Stesic started coming into the picture before even aerials, documenting some of the more aggressive moves that we were doing skateboarding. But the funny thing is that in between all the stuff that Stesic was shooting and that real slashy, low, surf style attack to skateboarding, here came this aerial that spontaneously just happened. And Glenn just happened to be the guy that was sitting there, the nerdy little kid with, the camera that he'd gotten at the thrift store or wherever he'd picked up his first camera, and he snapped that shot of me doing an air. And once people saw that, and there was other guys doing aerials at that time, but I don't think they were caught in the moment like that.
Yeah.
And then glorified through the media and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the Dogtown guys, we were the guys that they were chasing, as far as momentum goes.
Right.
And we were able to take from that move, that aerial, to the next level. And then it went into more like inverts, no-handed aerials.
Sure.
Skate parks started coming into play. Everything that we were riding in the backyard started to be manifested and actually built for us to skateboard in.
Yeah.
Skating in full pipes. Who would have thought they would do, today, if you would have told me you were going to do a loop in a pipe like these guys do nowadays, I would have told you, good luck with that.
Yeah.
You're going to end up fucking killing yourself or whatever. But, it's just incredible the things that skateboarders do nowadays. And I never really even dreamed that it would be at the level that it's at right now.
Yeah.
So the same as when I did the first aerial. Maybe people never envisioned that or actually thought that it was possible. But once it was done, okay, what can we do now?
Sure. But given how I watched aerials enter into surfing, and there was an obvious reference that skateboarders did this thing that we surfers
Well, Christian did them at Lowers first.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Christian
did. No, and I remember Christian Fletcher. I remember watching that for sure. And I was contemporary
So it
with
makes
Christian.
sense that spot would be the aerial spot.
It totally does. but I guess,
even though I think the best aerials I've ever saw in a contest was when Felipe Toledo was doing them at Jeffreys Bay that one time.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was incredible, boy. The Brazilians really, attack their aerials.
Well, you know what's interesting is I have a really close Brazilian friend, and we were talking about this thing, and he said, well, you know, part of the reason why is because we don't have a lot of point breaks. So it's almost everything's a beach
It's
break.
punchy.
Yeah, yeah. But
Well, I know I've surfed the spot that Gabriel's from, Marzias, and it's like a little Hollywood by the Sea wave. It's
yeah,
It's
exactly.
a good
Wedgie.
wave.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And there's a corner even,
Yep.
like Hollywood by the Sea, but it's opposite.
Yeah,
It's to the right instead of the left.
right. Yep. But when you, okay, so like surfing was clearly drawing from skateboarding when the airs came in, and Christian's even told me stories of like skating with Christian Hosoi and then
Yes.
in the morning at a half pipe in San Clemente and then going out that afternoon at Lowers on the left
On
with the wind
acid,
blowing.
like
Yeah.
on LSD.
But doing the first air, were you like, what was the was air just a given that's the next place because you're doing like 3 wheels out and then you're doing the edgers and then you're
I
like,
think it was the best feeling.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
It just gave you that feeling of like, wow, you know, and to manipulate and control gravity that way has always been the goal. I think even with surfing or
Yep.
with people flying planes or jumping and paragliding or whatever, anything where man is doing something way beyond what we were really, you know, designed to do.
yeah,
And all of a sudden we're able to contort and create and extend our ability to be a victim to gravity.
yep, yep,
You know, with surfing too. I mean, look at the way Italo and those guys do airs. I mean, these guys, they have no conception of frontwards, backwards, up, down, whatever. They just blast out. And when they land, it doesn't matter how and where they land, but it's just that sense of like, you know what, I'm going to stay on and pull this no matter what. That's kind of the way I look at it when those guys do airs.
yeah,
Some of the guys do a little bit more thought out when I see somebody like Dane Reynolds or, you know, some of the other guys that have a little bit more of a classic California style doing aerials. I see a different approach. But the Brazilians just are like helicoptering everything, you know. They just blast out and it doesn't matter. And they're not afraid to do it in really thick, heavy conditions.
yeah,
Which, unfortunately, for some pro surfers, just like with skateboarders, you're going to suffer the consequences when it comes to mislanding, stuff like that.
sure,
You know, look at what's happened with John. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like, you know, the human knees and ankles and tendons and all can only stretch to a certain point to where they're going to give out. And especially in thick shore breaky type of landings and stuff like that, or over landing something, or,
Yeah.
or maybe even under landing it.
yep,
But I know the fact that it's all fine and dandy to get up and get out there in the air. But the key to success when it comes to doing aerials, whether it be on a skateboard or any other, I mean, everything pretty much looks to skateboarding for aerial moves anyways. And I'm not just talking about surfing. I'm talking about every extreme thing pretty much in the world. But the landing is the most crucial part.
yeah,
Like you've got to have a smooth, really efficient landing in order not only to be good at what you're doing, but to be safe. And if you don't, you're not going to last long.
Yeah.
The knees are going to blow out. The
Yeah.
ankles are going to break. You're going to land on your shoulder or your wrist or, you know, just, and that's the thing about skateboarding I got to get to. You know, the only reason I've lasted as long as I have is because my technique with skateboarding a lot was very similar to surfing. Don't land like a sack of potatoes, dude. You don't want to hit the bottom. You definitely don't want to go head first.
yeah,
You want to slide or roll out and things like that because we didn't have a lot of pads. We were not forced to wear helmets when we were kids. We skated in little hang 10 shorts and Vans. You know, pads and helmets and all that stuff were non-essential at that point.
sure,
So I think the same thing with surfing. I mean, even in surfing today, I always like to wear something that has little knee covers like long johns and stuff in case you hit the rocks or the board pops up and gives you a shinner or whatever. You know, stuff like that. I always look towards, it's not just about the actual act of surfing. It's about what's going to happen if something goes wrong. You got to have good gear. You got to
Yeah.
be protected. You got to have a technique. Just like I said, refining your technique
Yeah.
is not just about on the board.
yeah,
It's what you do off the board.
Yep.
And then, as a professional, how do you handle yourself with the media? How do you handle yourself with your peers? How do you handle yourself with the ladies? It's like, dude, are you a real professional skateboarder? Then you better handle your game well in that situation too. And not be the hungry wolf that you were at 19 years old with the big ego.
yeah,
Because that's not going to work right now.
yep,
It makes you look pretty ignorant if you're still acting the way you did at 19 at 60-something years old. Basically, Muhammad Ali says you've wasted 30 years of your life if you're still doing that.
I love that quote. That's
I
a great
love
one.
that quote,
Yeah.
too. Muhammad Ali, he's the man.
Yeah.
Him and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, of course.
Yeah, Kareem's great too.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting talking about Muhammad Ali. I was in Australia about 5 years ago working on this book, and I sat with Rabbit Bartholomew in the cafe above Duranba at his local surf break, and we were talking about stuff. And I recently read this book, The Fight by Norman Mailer, and it's about the rumble in the jungle. And I was so taken by Ali, and I was there at the time, but I was young, but revisiting it later. And I was talking to Rabbit about the influence of Muhammad Ali, and I said, like,
Muhammad Bugs.
Yeah, exactly. But like Ali influenced athletes.
Weren't those photos Art Brewer too?
Yeah, they were.
I love Artie.
Yeah, and the
that was a great article.
That was great.
The Hawaiians didn't like it so much.
Definitely not. That brashness was not cool there. But the
well, they looked at it as a slap in the face too, and also something like, don't come to our islands and act like that and think you're going to come back and have the spirit of aloha, bro.
For sure. Yeah.
So back to what you were saying.
But
that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, but Muhammad Ali was so influential to all athletes of that period, right?
Yes. Well, he's the champ.
Yeah.
Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. I mean, even with skateboarding, that's a goal right there. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Come on.
Yeah. Rare to get such athletic prowess and then also being like a great mind. I mean, so witty and...
I think that all only comes with making mistakes, though, and finding what works for you and what doesn't work too. Because we got to pay some dues in order to get to a point like that in life, and I'm sure Muhammad Ali did.
Yeah, yes.
You know, his life was not always a bowl of cherries, like anything. Like with Bunker's life, when I look at Bunker's life, or when I look at just any great influential musician or artist like Bob Dylan or somebody, you know, it's just like it's not all just smooth and beautiful path.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, definitely. Who are your heroes? You have heroes?
I would say Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is definitely one of my heroes. There's the wisdom that he has, not to mention just being one of the greatest of all time. He's one of my heroes for sure. Wow, that is a really good question if you want to know the truth. I think there's a lot of women that are my heroes too. I think probably people like Patti Smith or whatever, you know, like a true to the game artist. Yeah. You know, somebody like that. I really look to spiritual leaders too. The late great Paramahansa Yogananda, the one that Swami's is named after, basically.
Yep.
His teachings, I think, are pertinent and really, really amazing. And the list goes on. But, you know, really deep down inside, my most influential influences, I think, are men that have been through hell and back and are at a point in their life or got to a point in their life where they had a spiritual awakening. Somebody like John Coltrane, you know, and regardless of their religious beliefs, it really doesn't have anything to do with religion. It has more to do with faith and belief in something that's bigger than yourself, and able to come to a point to where you could be humble, you know, and not always being the like, hey, look at me, and like, fuck you, do you know who the fuck I am, get out of my way kind of guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I found the people like that were still acting that way later in life, I wasn't attractive. It wasn't attractive to me, and I wasn't attracted to it.
No, I believe in kindness.
Well, you're probably never going to see that person ever again anyways in a city like this, so just keep rolling and let them roll. And you never know what that person's dealing with on a daily basis either. Yeah. And that can be the same way with surfing. Like when a guy's having a bad day and being like a bully out in the water, you know what? It's best to just let him go, you know?
Sure.
Let them go and keep space. Yeah. And that's something that kind of this COVID thing has taught us too. It's like sometimes it's better to have space because it's safer. Sure. But at the same time, I really miss having that social connection to people and stuff. And the people that I'm with at this point in my life are quality relationships. And those quality relationships, I want them to be as close as possible. And I'm not just talking about physically. I'm talking about emotionally, intellectually, pretty much anything. And like, that's why I love, you know, when you come at things that I see even sometimes and I read that are connected to your literati enthusiasm, you know, like basically being a writer. I find that because I'm a reader and I can write to a certain extent, but it's more personal. But I love reading pen to paper what people's thoughts are and what they have to say when it comes to things like that. And what I'm looking for is, where are they emotionally? Where are they spiritually? Where are they with compassion, which is something that I've always had a hard time with? Like, how can I learn from what they're saying to be a more emphatic and compassionate person in my own life?
Interesting that, because knowing your lifestyle, knowing your life, there was a level of being so famous that there was no, like, compassion doesn't necessarily grow in a person when everyone's just sort of bowing at their feet, right?
And everybody's buying you a drink at the bar for free, you know. That's,
yeah. So to kind of...
I still say thank you when people offer me a drink nowadays, but I say, you know what? You enjoy it, and just, I have no obsession for alcohol. But what you're mentioning, it can flare up sometimes. It's a slippery slope for me.
Yeah.
Occasionally.
Yeah. I have enough famous friends.
Ego is not my amigo. Let's put it that way. I heard that from an old timer that told me, hey, kid, let that shit go.
Yeah. No, I have enough famous and high profile friends where I love them, but I have seen how there's like a lot of qualities that are really good and enduring qualities are not cultivated in them because, and it's not their fault. It's just because people are kissing their ass all day long.
I hear you, man. And that's part of the deal, though, is to learn how to deal with that gracefully.
Yeah.
See, grace, even that word grace, means free. It's a blessing that's bestowed upon you for free. So to be graceful is to be full of that feeling of just, I'm free, you know?
Yeah.
And graceful for me means to handle yourself with respect and with dignity. And to basically, if you've got something that other people want, usually, it's because they see it in your actions. Not something you've said or, you know, or trying to convince them of or preaching to them about. It's more about like, I want what he's got because his actions speak much louder than anything I've heard anybody say. And so that a lot when I work with people, especially young men that want what I got, I'm just like, well, are you willing to do what I did to get it? And that's the big question. And I would say 99.9% of them, no, they're not willing. They think they can do it their way. And they're going to do it till the wheels fall off. And I'm just like, okay, but when you need me and when you want to listen, I'm here for you, man. But meanwhile, go for it.
Yeah.
Because I did.
Yeah.
But then again, about every other year or so, we lose one of those guys.
Yeah.
Like you talked about the Tony Alva story. The narrator, we lost him about a year ago.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is connected to, you know, the big pharma kind of thing even.
Sure.
So unfortunately, these guys think that because a doctor's prescribing something to them, that's a painkiller or something that's going to make them feel comfortable for the moment, that it's safe. And it's not.
Yeah.
So really mixing and partying like the way that I used to party was the drink started it all. But at the same time, drugs were a part of my spiritual experience. I always felt like I had to cocktail and mix drugs in to make it spiritual. Well, see, that was a facade. That's bullshit. That's the lie that I lived in. In the Bhagavad Gita, they call it Maya, the illusion. So the illusion basically is to separate yourself from ego and get back to the soul, the heart and soul. The heart and soul, the only way we can get that, keep on surfing, man. Keep on surfing, keep it real, and stay stoked, and just do it because you love it.
Yeah.
But take the ego out of it.
Yeah.
Because the ego is the ego wants me to go back to drinking, man. The ego wants me to be that womanizer, that guy. I mean, how unattractive is it, a 64-year-old man chasing around, you know, girls at a bar that are, you know, 5 years less than my daughter and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just ugly. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's an ugly act when you got this hungry wolf, this guy with the ego, thinking that he's attractive in that way.
Yeah.
And it's really unattractive.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Even
though we all have sexual hangups, I mean.
Yeah. No, but I know what you're talking about. But being, okay, so I'm sitting
the libido connected to the ego, boy, that's a real problem. That's like throwing fuel on the fire. You know what I mean?
That's funny. But you're 64 and I'm sitting next to you right now and you're so fit. And I've seen you
to a certain extent. I have some little issues here and there.
But what is
I got a gangster stroll, you know, but once I get on the board I look all right because it's a knock-knee thing, which works for all of it. You know, we've always liked that knock-knee style, especially like if you look something like Mark Richards or whatever when you're surfing, you're the wounded gull, you're all right.
No, but I grew up with the knock-knee too, and I know watching you skate, you have the knock-knee. Derek Hine, who's a good friend who we all probably love.
Love that guy.
Knock-kneed and real low on the finless boards.
I don't ride finless boards, but I do use that technique that Derek uses a lot. Instead of doing the mental masturbation hop thing, I don't do that. I don't do the HB hop as they call it. I will get down low like Derek and just stay in the pocket and go until I get to the point where there's enough momentum to do another turn. Yeah.
For whatever reason,
I learned that from watching Derek ride finless boards.
Interesting. Well, I, as like a 9 or 10-year-old, had a bane fiberglass 24-inch skateboard, and I would ride down the hill having watched you guys in the skateboard magazines, and I was emulating the style, which was very knock-kneed, and the knock-kneed had stayed with me. And now, at age 55, I can be in a real low crouch, almost freakishly for my age, and I'm totally comfortable in it.
Yeah.
But what?
Because it's kind of like, it's part of where we came from.
Yeah,
was
exactly.
to be able to get low. I mean, like we were never those straight up.
Yeah.
Even Torger Johnson, as tall and big as he was and stuff, he could get down and get low.
Yeah.
And throw down when it came to not only a skateboarder, but a surfer. But I think inherently for us, surfing is about less is more.
Yeah, sure.
And getting in the pocket and being low really works.
Yeah.
And Derek's the perfect example of that because, and even Crookie, you watch the way, you know.
Oh yeah, Crookie's great. I love Crookie.
That's his nickname, I know, but I love calling him Crookie.
Yeah.
But you know, when he gets down low and does what he does and throws the tail, or Dan Malloy, any of those guys are riding the rabbit's foot and stuff. It's the key really is to be in the pocket and be low, and not to be trying to do too much, to let the wave and the board do for you what you cannot do for yourself.
Yeah. But do you think, is it because you've been doing it your entire life, it's like your body's just sort of shaped it, or is it sort of, are there like diet and health elements that contribute to
It's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of everything. Definitely some stretching, yoga-based stuff. Not just running out the door, making sure that you have enough fuel in you. You know, I can't just run on a piece of toast and a cup of coffee, you know. Mm-hmm. At this age, I need fuel, you know. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And usually complex carbohydrates, something that's not based on not too much sugar or you know, we got to take it easy on everything.
Yeah.
On like everything that the body has a problem processing, you know. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a full-on vegan guy and all that stuff, because I feel like, especially at this point in my life, my body cries for protein, you know, sometimes too. At 64 years old, your muscles will start to emaciate if you work out as much as I do, and you don't have some kind of protein. Mm-hmm. So I highly recommend you have some kind of protein in your life, whether it be meat or fish or whatever, or tofu. But to balance everything in moderation is really important.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know surfers are big on it right now. It's the prehab. You know, instead of rehab, doing the prehab thing is to be prepared for going into battle before you ever get there, knowing that if you do the work, your percentages of getting injured are way less.
Yeah.
And so that prehab mentality is really, really beneficial. I've seen a lot of surfers start to do it too. It's very wise. And I think a lot of that stuff comes from professional athletes, like guys, you know, that are playing in the NBA and stuff like that. I mean, just amazing athletes. But I think surfers can incorporate it into their life, but it's just the fact is you have to slow down a little.
Yeah.
We have to take it easy, man. We're not just running out the door and trying to be the first guy out there. You know, if you're going to do that stuff, Dawn Patrol, you better get up when it's still dark, man, and do your prehab stuff, because I'm telling you, especially in conditions like that where the visibility is low and it's colder and all of that, and you're just charging into things, the best wisdom you can use is to be prepared for that moment. Mm-hmm. And especially getting your rhythm, like that first wave is always so crucial. Haven't you found that the first wave kind of sets the rhythm for the session?
Sometimes it's even as far as like getting the right parking spot to be in that rhythm. It's funny, at Malibu, I have a friend who like always nails the right spot, and we've talked about it, and he's like, yeah, if I get the right spot, I'll actually like lock into the rhythm in the surf too.
Well, you know what I try to do is I go to the top lot and I walk around the lagoon and I paddle out at second point.
Right.
And I get like a couple waves at second point,
you're warmed up,
and then work my way down. And then I run into Alan or Andy or one of the boys, and then they're like, hey, TA, what's up? And then they're like, when a set comes, let's go.
Yeah.
And then we get a wave together, like with Alan and I especially. We get in a groove. And even Alan will I'll have to go to a business meeting because he's, you know, business guy in Malibu. I'll go out and I'll still get a couple more because of the rhythm that I set from not only the first steps, but from actually kind of getting in the groove with where not only that day is, but staying in the moment and just taking that momentum to the next level. But then I got to remember, don't get too ambitious, because ambition crosses over to greed with me real easy. That's when I'm going to run into problems. So I'll maybe get 3 or 4 more decent or good ones, and then I'm going to humbly walk out.
Yeah.
And walk back the point and watch other people enjoying and surfing, and just carry my stick with grace and just be like, boom, I'm good.
I do that a lot.
We have to.
Quitting while we're ahead.
Because that's an artist. An artist has got to know when the painting's done. An artist has got to know when the book's done.
Yes. My friend has a great expression. He says, his name is Garth Murphy. He says, the art of living is the art of leaving, which is to say, like, know when it's time to get out. And on that note, anything more you want to talk about, or we got everything?
Oh, man, what an amazing conversation. Jamie, I can just say, that we are truly brothers because of not only our history and the time that we grew up, but I think it's just our knowledge, and I say our knowledge, of where we came from, what happened, where we're headed now. It's invaluable. And I fully see that there's a bright future for us, as long as we really continue to carry like that lesson that life has taught us, I think, in the long run. And that's the fact that, we're enthusiastic about what we do, but we want to share it. But we don't want to preach to people. But at the same time, we want everybody to have what we're so enthusiastic about. And I see that in you too, not only as a writer, but as a surfer and just as a human being. And I really feel that that's the message right now, and the fact that, you're interviewing people like Rabbit and, Stephanie Gilmore and there's just some really amazing talent that I know have spiritual interests as well as being creative. And I feel like that has been the thesis in what we've discussed, is that we're showing that connection to all mankind and humanity through our appreciation for the arts and for life in general, because of the fact that I think surfing has given us a life that has connected me to not only a livelihood, but something that has given me longevity to where I can actually share it with the world, and especially through the youth, and just direct them in a positive direction by just going one day at a time, one step at a time in a positive direction. And that positive direction is just, what? All I got is today. Yeah. And I'm going to do the best that I can just for today. And, even if it's a day where I decide not to even step on a board and just do some reading and maybe do some soul searching and some meditation and listen to some good music or sit around and play my acoustic guitar or whatever. So this is the message that we're carrying. It's like, stay true to the game. Water the roots. The roots are the essential, the vitality that comes from life is because we water our roots with faith and with love. And we believe not only in ourselves, but also in a power in the universe that's greater than ourselves.
I grew up skating and surfing, looking up to you and others, and later in life got into journalism. And part of it was, I was just it was a kind of way to connect with my heroes in a different way and to actually be able to ask the questions we just went through. But it's great. And now I'm at a stage in my life where I'm often thinking, okay, surfing and skating can easily kind of maroon you early on in life because they're often youth oriented. Yeah. And when I see people having the sort of long run with them and keeping it beautiful and keeping growing and keeping it interesting.
Definitely.
That I come doing this right now, just trying to learn and try to apply some of it to my own life. It's a genuine question inside of me. So
I'm attracted to that, definitely.
Yeah, no, and I so appreciate that. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Tony.
You're welcome.
And
you tell Stephanie I said hello, and Rabbit and all those guys. I love the Aussies. I love all graceful, beautiful surfers. I could go on with a list of just 100 different people that are surfers that I really respect and love. But then there's a new generation nowadays that's taking it to the limit, and I respect them as well because of the fact that they're courageous enough to go out and do what they do and do it on the top of their game, and I know how that feels. So to have you here and be able to discuss all of these things is essential to me, because I really just want to show people that you can be free, just happy, joyous, and free by taking life to a place to where, you're really not enslaved to anything outside of yourself. And that to look deep down inside and feel content with who you are, that's the true freedom in life.
Nice. Thanks, TA.
You're welcome, bro. Peace.
Soundings is produced by me, Jamie Brisick, and Jonathan Shiflett. Our theme song is Neptune's Next by Little Wings. The Surfer's Journal is a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Birdwell, FCS, Patagonia, Rainbow, Vans, Vissla, and Yeti. To subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you again.